Hello and welcome. For those of you who do not know, my name is Angelina, and I have been speaking for months about learning how to find the patterns and how to objectively observe your past and see your life as a hero's journey. I've done this, and I have finally cracked the code. And I've been spending the last couple of days trying to figure out a way to bring this to you in a way that is both deep, relatable, and fun. So, I have decided. For those of you who do not know, Diablo is my favorite game. I never played video games until my second marriage, and it actually ends up working out really well for me to be able to explain this to you using exactly that. However, the way that I want to explain this doesn't work so very well with the platform of the Diablo and the way that it works, except for in like different versions than what I played for like 3 years. So, because I played Diablo 3 on PlayStation, okay? I have played Diablo 4. I have never finished it because kind of moved off grid, so I never finished Diablo 4. But instead of using Diablo, I am going to use my second favorite game, which is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So, as you can imagine, I'm pretty big into warriors, and especially like the hero's journey. And so I want to talk about your evolution as a human using the idea and understanding of video games, okay? Specifically the skill tree. So for all of my wonderful like gamers out there, you know exactly what I mean when I say skill tree. For those of you who don't, when you unlock a skill, you place it on your tree or you pick it on your tree, and then it creates your character based on those particular skills that you have unlocked, okay? So if you imagine your life as these skills that you unlock as you go along, we're going to call those skills our archetypes, okay? So an archetype is kind of like a badge. Okay, so let's say you have played this existence many times, okay? Every time you choose to incarnate, you choose a particular path which you want to take, okay? So let's say you are not a fresh soul. You've been doing this for a while. You've got a massive skill tree, okay? But every time you incarnate, you have to re-unlock those archetypes. Okay? And I'm not going to go all the way back into my childhood. I'm going to tell you that in my childhood, I unlocked 3 different archetypes, okay? Within self. And those archetypes were the hopeless lover, the underdog, and the hermit. I spent a lot of my childhood in isolation. I was not very popular, like at all. I was awkward. I didn't know how to speak to people. I learned how to read from the dictionary and then dove into classic literature. So I didn't even speak the same language as most people around me. And it was awkward for adults to have a conversation with me. So I didn't really know how to talk to people. And then at 14, this is when I started to this is when I gained my second archetype. Well, fourth archetype, I guess. But this archetype opened up gateways, okay? And every time you unlock one of your archetypes, it opens up a new pathway. So let's say that you start your video game, okay? And you don't really start like really participating until 14. So let's say that your childhood is the tutorial. Okay, you're wandering around the world trying to learn who you are, right? So then at 14, the gates open. Level 1, teenage. Okay, so I have broken down every single one of my cycles, and I can see exactly when they started. My very first gate actually opened when I was 16 years old. When that gate opened, I had a choice to make. Level 1 boss. Will you sell your soul? Let's begin. This is the beginning of my first archetype journey. The one I have named the DD, aka the couch ride. So, 14 years old, I start out my journey with my best friend. He stayed my best friend for 26 years. And he was my first, major boyfriend. And I learned how to interact with men through the DD ride, the couch ride. This was my learn you. Not necessarily me. I'm just here to absorb the information and understand your world so I can dig into it, get down to the depths, and see what's there that I need to learn. This is my learning how to be a human analyzer. The ha. Aha! Okay, so the DD ride, with couch ride, allows me to analyze human behavior. Again, prior to this, I've been mostly isolated. I don't understand people. I only know me and literature. So when this DD ride opens up, my world is open up to a whole new understanding of everything. My interest in literature shifted from classic literature and to the occult. And I started my world learning about the occult. Prior to this, I had only been on the RR train, the rigid and righteous train. I'll get to that later. So the DD ride takes me away from the RR, okay? So the DD ride leaves the train station. So we'll go RR to the DD. The DD leads into this dark world that I've never experienced before, because the world that I was in that was dark was scary. The occult world was shadow that I didn't understand, and so it was interesting for me. But that DD ride, that opened a new gate, a new level, a new boss, the DV. Enter the violent male. This created a cycle. I am very proud to say it only lasted 2 cycles. Good for me. So the RR led to the DD, which led to the DV, which led back to the DD. I was like, ooh, that was a little too scary. I gotta recalibrate. Sat down in the DD chair again, continued my life for another couple of years, and then enter again. Level 2, DV boss. Ready, fight. 2 months. 2.5. 2.5 months in DV. Enter a brand new ride. I graduated. I realized as I'm in these levels, remember, I am gathering information. So while I'm in these 2 domestic violence situations, one at the age of 15/16, 2.5 weeks, 17 days. So 17 days and then 2.5 months. That was a total of the amount of time it took me to remove myself from the situation and say, oh, no, never going down that road again. I calculated all of everything. I picked up every single cue, every single red flag, and I knew immediately, you are that, and we'll go down that road. So that's a no. I will not go near you. And I have many times in my life spotted and said, nope, walk away. Okay? So I graduated. I reached that level. Again, I told you number 1 gate opened at 16. Will you sell your soul? And I chose no. And I got a congratulations. Move on to the next level. Okay? So the DV, again, opened up a new ride. Welcome in Chaos, the JD ride. However, this is the pup version, so we'll consider him the tutorial. Okay? So instead of being the JD ride, he's JD light. I'll explain. The JD ride, and I've had 4. The JD ride is the Jack drinker, the Harley rider, the little bit crazy. You can't quite figure them out. But don't worry, they're not quite violent. I draw the line every time. So, the DV ride leads to the JD ride introductory series. This was an amazing experience for me. I learned how to drive off-road. I learned how to control a large vehicle. I learned quite a bit about mechanics that I didn't know before. And I also learned what I didn't want in a ride. So when I ended up in this very first JD ride, this was my first time going over 90 miles an hour on the back of a motorcycle. Well, first time on the back of a motorcycle. Like, it wasn't a Harley, it was a Honda. So like I said, this was my introductory ride, right? Like, he drove a stick shift, big fucking 1-ton diesel that he taught me how to lose control and regain control on a dirt road. So I learned quite a bit. I learned how to drive a stick, which I kind of knew before, but I got really good at driving a stick. I learned granny low. I learned how to skip gears. I learned how to fishtail. I learned how to get out of it. I learned so much in that first JD ride. And I was like, I like this ride. It's a little wild. So then that JD ride led to the crazy train. Yes, the crazy train. I ended up back at the train station, and the crazy train always leads back to the righteous train. So, crazy train enters. What happens with a crazy train? Oh, that's right. In comes the train wreck. I'm not kidding. After my relationship with the JD ride, I entered into the crazy train. I went way off board. Chaos took over my life. Okay? So this is the first evidence of me finding a cycle repeat. Okay? So the JD to the crazy train to the train wreck ended up leading me back actually to another JD ride. That JD ride led to the most amazing change in my life. I joined the military. I realized I'd gone off the rails. Once I realized I'd gone off the rails, I realized I needed discipline. I was really, really good at holding chaos. The things that happened to me before I joined the military are just ridiculous. Okay, I was really, really good at holding chaos. But something I hadn't ever done was actually hold discipline. And so my going off the rails and leading back to a JD ride, I realized there was a problem. So that led to jumping back on to the RR train. The righteous and rigid. But this time, I allowed myself to enter into that righteous and rigid while holding the chaos. I expanded myself. This was my very first humongous step towards evolution. Okay? And while a lot of people may not understand this from this particular perspective, you have to understand that I am an expansive person. Okay? I hold a lot. At this point in time in my life, it was mostly just chaos and rigidity. It gets more complex. Okay? So when I joined the military, oh man, You have no idea. It was like every single like piece of my life suddenly fell into place. I excelled. I didn't just follow the rules, like I lived by them. I bled blue. I received awards and accolades, things I'd never gotten in my life, recognition for my intelligence. That was something I'd never had before. And then suddenly, here it is. Hey, you're doing really good. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you this. And then suddenly I'm like hyper fucking focused. All I can see is respect. Something I'd never been given before. I had never been taken seriously in my life. No matter how intelligent I had been, no one could understand me. They didn't know. But when I went into the military, I didn't just go into the military. I went into the hardest academic school in the entire United States military. Only 0.1% of the 1% that join the military can actually pass the school. And so for me, this was like my greatest pride. And for the first time in my life, I felt pride. And this allowed me to expand myself, to be able to hold both this rigidity, this absolute follow that line every single motherfucking time, and absolute chaos. If I wasn't in uniform, I was a whirlwind. And I went everywhere. I did everything. I knew everyone. I saw everything that I could possibly see. I experienced life beyond just the rigidity. And I allowed myself to be able to hold order and chaos. And I was damn good at it. The people that knew me in uniform had absolutely no idea how wild I was outside of uniform. I didn't hang out with the people I worked with. But the people that knew me from outside, usually the freaking tank mechanics and the flight line guys, like those were the people I hung out with. They were rowdy. They were loud. They were obnoxious. I loved it. That's how I released so much tension. But at this point in time in my life, I'm driven by anger as well. I am so repressed emotionally. I know two emotions, laughing and punching. That's it. And the rigidity within work was destroying me because I was repressing everything. And whenever I walked into work, the pain along both sides of my spine from the rigidity was unbearable. But I loved my life. I loved my job. And then, cycle 2. This was fun. So I hopped on that RR/CT. And then enter into my life significant relationships. I was in the military for about 4 years before I got married the first time. This was pressure. I've talked about this before. I felt like I'd already been called runaway bride for many years in my life, and I was already 27, and it was like the biological clock was like going tick, 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 and so like I settled. Don't get me wrong, like I adored him, but I knew we weren't like the same. He was funny. It was my second DD. So, or not my second DD, but he was my next DD. So my next DD ride, couch ride, introduced me into a world I'd never been in before because I absolutely despised that world. And as a matter of fact, I continued to stay away from that world and was pretty upset to find out that the number one thing I hated more than anything was actually my husband's like favorite thing in the entire world. Liar. Lied about everything. Legit, like everything. And so like when I found that out, I was like, You're kidding me, right? I literally told you the night that I met you how much I despise that which you love, and you literally didn't say anything for a year and a half? So the DD ride was very short-lived and went straight to a JD ride. The JD ride entered into my life when I was at my most expansive. It was 2012. Now, this is a very significant date because it's exactly 12 years after my first gate. 12 is a magic number. The entire zodiacal calendar. Here I am at my most expansive I've ever been in my life, but also repressed. And while I'm riding that JD ride, a unicorn enters my life. A motherfucking unicorn. Somebody as expansive as me. And he's wonderful. But I'm fucking riding the JD ride. And I can't get over the JD ride because the JD ride is just so much fucking fun chaos. It's like chaos all the time. I loved the chaos. It was still a point in my life where I may have been able to hold order, but I didn't understand stillness. There was never a moment in my life when I was still except for when I was sleeping, and I literally got home right before bed. I didn't understand stillness. So when this unicorn, the one I have named the double T, the triple threat, when he entered into my life in 2012, literally on my 28th birthday, I walked away from him for the JD ride. And I started a brand new cycle. 2012, I see you, sir. I remember you. You were wonderful. I apologize I did not see you. I was blinded. Moving on. So, the TT ride, I walked away for the JD ride, which ended 3 months later. And I ended up on the 7-year tour of the DD ride. This DD ride wasn't the same as my previous DD rides. He opened up a new gate. The WW ride, the Wounded Warrior. So, during this 7-year tour, my life began to fall apart. Because I went from being a whirlwind of chaos and rigidity to rigidity and a couch ride. And every dream I had, I watched them all fade away. And then, as those dreams faded, my mental health faded. As my mental health faded, I myself became the wounded warrior. And I lost my career. And it was devastating for me. Because it was the only thing I loved left in my life. I shouldn't say that. By that point, I had my children. But my husband and I didn't like each other. He was an alcoholic, and I wanted freedom. All I could see was a pin, a 5-acre pin, and I was locked in the paddock, a wild, painted horse in a paddock. And my soul, my ember, began to die. And then to couple it all on top of that, not only was I dealing with my own PTSD, I was watching the father of my children be eaten alive by his own, culminated in his death, and the pendulum swing. Here I am, a widow and retired at the age of 35. Not the way I saw my life going at all. And I struggled with that. Quietly, silently, deep in my soul, burying it more and more and more. When he passed away, I went downhill. And the gate was left open. And I went fucking running. But I had no idea where to go. I had no career. I had no significant other. I had no help to raise my children. And I just fucking wanted out of where I was. I never wanted to live where I was. It wasn't my dream. My dream was states away. And that dream was literally no longer a possibility for me. And so I screamed out that gate, running around in freaking circles, had no freaking clue what the hell to do. End of a 7-year freaking tour on the couch. During those 7 years is where I gained quite a bit of my understanding, though, of a lot of things. Alcoholism, PTSD, video games, YouTube. I had never really been on YouTube prior to that. And loneliness. Absolute isolation. It was the first time I had been in isolation since I was 14 years old. He had no friends. I had no friends. The children had no friends. I never left the house except to go to the grocery store and the therapist. So 7 years of this. If you can understand the way a pendulum swings, then you can understand exactly why I went running with absolutely no direction, chaotically, as fast as I possibly could. And then it hit me. Right in the face. You need to do this. So I finished my degree. I went back to school, finished my degree, started a new career. New year, new me. Literally, by the end of the following year, I was in a new career. Dusty passed away in 2020. I graduated in 2021. I immediately began my career in mental health. This was a very tough journey. Understand, I went from being a wild, chaotic military vet to a therapist. And don't get me wrong. Yes, I may be absolutely motherfucking ridiculous half the time. But when you put any kind of professional label on me, I'm not the same person. When I dove into the world of psychology, I dove in there with a completely different personality than what you may see. This required me to be both wounded warrior and the RR at the same time. So I had to take on this double role in my own life. This was completely all done under the surface. Nobody has any idea what's going on. All they see is this face. And at that point in time in my life, I was very much on that RR train. I was very, very moral, very righteous. 99% of the people I knew thought I had and always had been a goody two-shoes. Literally, they had no idea anything about the chaotic mess that was underneath of the surface. The me inside that just wanted to be wild and free. I couldn't be because of the wounds. And so began the next stage of my journey. The RR to SF, WW to WM switch. So, like I said, as time changes, new gates open, new pathways align, right? So at this point in time, this is an evolutionary stage. I am changing from the religious and rigid or righteous and rigid into the spiritually free individual I would become by the end of this cycle. This is a 4-year tour, 2021 to the end of 2025 this year. Okay? In that 4 years, I've lived several lifetimes. I have evolved in so many ways. I went from being the wounded warrior who was literally had to be in a therapy session weekly, having panic attacks 3 to 4 times a week, literally unable to leave the house because I'm agoraphobic. To this. The RR to SF switch and the WW to WM switch. The wounded warrior to the warrior monk. Learning how to go from being that rigid and righteous to being spiritually free and seeing the difference between authority and sovereignty changed my world. Because when I released that authority, I realized I'm fucking perfect the way that I am. I'm meant to be this way because I hold so much. Every single person I have ever been with in my life, whether it be for 2 seconds or 2 years, I gather all of the information from them. If you know me on a personal level, you know you can't help but tell me everything about your life. I have that personality. I am the type of person that people walk up to in the store and just tell everything to, because I give off that vibe. I'm meant to be this way. I'm meant to be so complex. I'm meant to have lived in 40 different places, in places that were so different culturally that I had to learn how to adjust. I had to learn how to speak because I didn't learn the same language that everybody else did the same exact way. I've been spending my whole life analyzing human behavior because that's what I do. This allowed me to go from that wounded warrior to the wounded healer. Going from wounded warrior to warrior monk opened up a whole new world of the warrior healer, which is the archetype in which I sit now. In this moment, understand that archetypes are your skill tree. You have access to those archetypes anytime. So every single one of these levels that I've passed, all of the information that I have gathered along the way allows me to be able to spot you without even knowing you. Because that data, yes, it may have been information, but subconsciously, below the surface, I was picking up on your energy the entire time. I just didn't realize it. And so now that I've done this and objectively observed my life, I know all of the signs of all the archetypes that I've already lived through, gone through, experienced. And every time you do this, you open up a new pathway. So here I am, sitting in my warrior, healer archetype. I know where the cycle ends this year. Why? Because 40 was the end of last cycle, and I made that change. I stepped out of that gate. I said, I'm done with the JD ride. I want an upgrade. I'm good with the crazy train. Bring me the adventure with the tempered chaos, the controlled chaos, the ability to hold a loose schedule, allowing myself freedom with structure. Did I evolve? Oh, that's right. I know this game. So let's talk about that. Every lifetime, every existence, every incarnation is a new skin, a new adventure, a new hero's journey. You have access to every single archetype you have ever conquered in your entire existence. Now understand that when we're talking about this on an incarnation level, in a finite period of time, you don't conquer these archetypes in a lifetime. You access these archetypes in a lifetime. You can gain new archetypes in a lifetime, but they take a lot of time to master. Energy is very intricate. And if you don't understand it, because you've actually studied it, then it gets confusing. So it's not like you come into this world like preloaded with 144,000 different archetypes, unless, of course, you've mastered 144,000 different archetypes, which would, be 12 dimensions, 12,000 times, which is the 144,000. This is the ability to hold that much bandwidth. So let's say you're a mid-level character. And I'm not saying you're not important. I'm just saying you're mid-level, meaning this is like your 6th incarnation. You're working on your Gemini flip, okay? And your archetype is teaching you how to expand yourself to those polar opposites, because that's what Gemini is, right? This is you recognizing that you are both sides of that energy and learning how to hold all of your own bandwidth within your single individual body, so that when the other body that holds all of your bandwidth comes along, you recognize them because they hold the same frequency. Every single soul has its own individual frequency. You split to be able to fit your infinite amount of soul into a finite being. You have to be able to make yourself fit into that finite being by transcending your physical limitations. This is your journey in this lifetime. That's your mission, should you choose to accept. Can you hold your entire bandwidth? Every single archetype you've ever experienced. every single lifetime. They're not identities, they're skills. This is your skill set. I do not identify as a particular archetype. I hold as many as I possibly can. I want to say Boy Scout, but or Girl Scout badges, you know, I've got my whole vest is full. But that's because of the fact that I've given myself the chance to evolve. Everybody that looks at my life could sit there and say, oh, it's a chaotic mess. I just explained to you, it's not. It is me learning how to deal with humans. I didn't understand when I was a child. I didn't get to learn how to interact with people. I was isolated. And there have been a lot of times in my life where, again, I was isolated. But for me, isolation has been so normal that now it doesn't bother me. Now it's the best time in the world. Because now I see how expansive I can get. And the more I objectively observe, the more I understand our existence. I really hope that you enjoyed the way that I explained archetypes. Because I'm going to keep talking about this. Understanding your archetype, I shouldn't say archetype, archetypes. Understanding your archetypes is super useful for you. This is your hero's journey. This is the culmination, guys. This is the end. We are graduating. And I know that might not make sense to everybody, but I see it differently. This is us finishing the fucking game. After this, it'll be a whole new game. Fun, exciting, adventure, always. Growth and expansion are the best things that could ever happen to you. Life is so amazing when you just sit back and enjoy the ride. And make sure you switch up your ride every now and then. You don't want to get stuck in the same archetype forever. It's an adventure. Maybe today you're an explorer. Maybe tomorrow you're the wounded healer. And then the day after that, you're that crazy train. Enjoy life, guys. Bye.